The rich coffee smell wasn't enough to keep Jared alert. He tried to follow Zach's orders, but already a customer had screamed at him when he used non-fat milk instead of regular. Another had walked out when he'd taken too long. Zach moved around him, splashing together concoctions for the Milton's regulars, but even before they spit out their orders, Jared rolled his shoulders. Gotta do better, he thought. He'd only started the job a few days ago. It'd taken him almost 3 weeks to heal from his fall. Rooftop swan dives were officially off his list of things to do. Eden coming in today? Zach asked, twisting to fill another paper cup. Not sure. Maybe. Tomorrow, probably? Zach moved in front of Jared, pausing enough to catch his attention. She okay? Zach hadn't been told why Adam suddenly wasn't with their crew anymore. The one time it was brought up, Jared's discomfort left Zach assuming there'd been a nasty breakup between Eden and Adam. Sure, Jared said, already knowing his answer came too quick to be believable. She's got the new boyfriend, so they've been holed up. Right. Zach frowned. Well, tell her I miss her face. I'll pass it on. Jared took a second to strip off his dirty gloves and throw on a new pair. How about you? You seem off today. Jared shrugged. He'd known Zach a while now. Granted, he'd been on the other side of the counter before, a customer, not an employee. Still, if he was that easy to read, Jared needed to work better at hiding his worry. Just tired. I'm sorry. He'd spent the last night out with Eden, scouring block after block, alleys and cafes and dark corners, searching for any sign of a spoilery person. Too many hours of rushing adrenaline. The 3 hours of sleep he'd gotten left him feeling drugged, disoriented. The shuffling approach of another customer brought him back to the counter. What can I get you? He asked. When there was no answer, he glanced up. The girl at the counter stared at his hands. He waved one in front of her. Order? Oh, she said suddenly, as if realizing there was a line behind her. Her eyes jumped to the menu. Surprise me with something. You got it. He turned, throwing together a mix of flavors and steamed milk. He tossed some whipped cream on top and slid the cup across the counter as he took her $20 bill. When he dropped the change into her hand, she whimpered. He froze instinctively, but he knew he hadn't passed her touch. His gloves were fresh, and he hadn't made contact. Even if he had, she wouldn't have felt it for hours still. He eyed the girl. She stared back, her teeth digging into a chapped lip. A few minute cracks started to seep maroon. The girl didn't seem to care at all. We good here? He asked slowly. She wandered off to a table without responding. Jared watched her, unsure if he should mention her to Zach. If the girl was a regular, maybe he knew something about her, something that would account for her bizarre reaction to his hands. Normal customers didn't get all wigged out when he handed them their change. But she didn't act like a sider either. Something familiar about her struck him. Spoilers. He was reminded of someone who was no longer present. He knew this girl wasn't her. Still, the first night this girl found their crew when she'd been amping up the act. This girl looked like that, like she was in trouble. Except something in her eyes, that split lip, made him believe she wasn't acting. She looked like she had a rough night, a rough year. She looked like she needed help. Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence, Zach said. Jared's attention whipped to the counter. Eden smirked at him from the other side, Az behind her. I told Zach I didn't know if you'd be in today. Needed a caffeine fix, huh? He gave Eden a closer look. Anything new? You only left a little bit ago. Our lives aren't that exciting. Jared caught the sarcasm and rolled his eyes. Think you can handle making me something? Eden asked, changing the subject. He turned to grab a cup, but Zach was already there. She's easy. Always the same, and she leaves a kick-ass tip, Zach said, setting a large coffee cup in front of Eden. Best kind of customer. He leaned closer to Eden and wiped at her cheek with a gloved hand. She jerked away, her palm raising to her face. Sorry, you had something black on you. She scooted back into Az. What was it? Fuzz or something? Zach said. He tilted his chin up at Az. Want anything? He stared at the menu board for a second before shrugging. I don't know, surprise me. Jared couldn't help but glance in the direction the girl had gone. Nobody will make a decision today. From a table far back in the corner, the girl watched him. No, she focused slightly in front of him on Eden. Jared nodded in the girl's direction. You know her? He asked Eden. Eden and Az turned. The girl didn't look away. Az slipped his arm around Eden's waist. She sure seems interested. Jared tapped the order into the cash register and grabbed the bill Eden held out. I rang her out. She seemed bizarre, he said as he made change. Like, bizarre how, Jared? Eden leaned on the counter, gauging his reaction. He shrugged. Jumpy around my hands? You didn't. Eden paled, glancing down, and waved away her change, the motion a double meaning. Of course not. He cut her off. He tilted his head at the girl, but there's something off about her. Eden turned to Az. Any thoughts? Jared heard what she'd really asked him. Was it the bound, the fallen? He fought to keep the fear off his face. Zach knew nothing of upstairs or downstairs, any angels, and for now it was best it stay that way. Az shook his head, and Jared released a breath he hadn't realized he held. I'll keep an eye on her, Jared said. He grabbed a cup, filled it for Az, and handed it over. Let me know. Az and I are headed to the Bronx. Eden paused. We need to tell the truth. Jared followed her down the counter as she moved toward the door. If she was going to the Bronx, Eden must be way more spent than she let on. You want to wait until I get off? He wasn't sure exactly what Eden had told her about what happened that morning. It hadn't mattered to him. Eden shook her head. No, we've got it. Before they went outside, she turned back. Even from the counter, Jared saw the way she hesitated before her eyes sparked with defiance. Whatever she was about to say, he wasn't going to like it. Az and I are going out later tonight. Just us. Jared grabbed a rag from the counter, swiped angrily. Their date night thing seemed an unnecessary chance, though he couldn't really be too pissed since they all searched every night. The problem was how exhausted Eden looked. She was pushing herself too hard. She'd done it before, when she'd been killing the ciders and the buildup of touch had messed her up. Now she was testing her limits again. And like last time, it fell on Jared to play the bad guy. Shouldn't you rest or something? I thought the point of going to the Bronx was getting back up. You look like crap, Eden. Eden's glare burned into him as Az strode back to the counter. Listen, don't be like this, Az said, his voice cool, low enough not to carry to Eden. We've all been through hell, man, but that girl, he pointed back to her, deserves something happy. It's one night, Jared. She needs it. I need it. Az shifted closer to be sure Jared caught his meaning. He wiped down the espresso machine, focusing on it so he wouldn't give away his anger. He didn't trust Az. Not when at any moment he could snap. He'd seen what the fallen could do. If you're having trouble not falling, you should have told us. And now I have. Az stepped back from the counter. We won't be late. We'll both have phones. He swung the door open for Eden. Jared. Eden's eyes flicked back to the coffee shop. Be careful. When he turned around, the strange girl raised a hand, her fingers twitching in a half wave. Jared didn't look away until she faltered, going back to her coffee. Whatever trouble she was in, he didn't want any part of it.